Chapter 1, Before the Break-In. Chapter 2, The Break-In. Chapter 3, The Public Defender. Chapter 4, Defamation of Character. Chapter 5, The Electronic Criminal. Chapter 6, The Prison Camp. Chapter 7, The Halfway House. Chapter 8, Supervised Release. Chapter 9, Final Thoughts. Chapter 1, Before the Break-In. Frank and I have been together for over 40 years. During our long relationship, we have endured many obstacles. The story that I'm going to tell is true, and I feel this was the right time to put it together. By the way, my name is Marie, and I will try and simplify a very complicated story. Frank got into trouble with the government over 20 years ago, but I'm going to go back 8 years before that. Back in 1988, Frank asked me if I thought we should have credit in case we ever wanted to buy our home. And I said that was a good idea. I asked Frank, how do you plan to get us started? He said the best way is to get a loan and pay on time and then apply for credit cards to build a relationship with different banks. This will show a positive record on our credit report. The next day, Frank called me from work and said he made an appointment with Household Finance to apply in person. He told me to get our financial records ready and we could go over everything when he comes home from work. So that night, we went over everything and Frank decided that we were ready to go to Household Finance the next day and put our best foot forward. When we arrived at their office, we greeted them with respect. We filled out all the paperwork, and they told us our credit line will be determined by our combined income. They told us that they will let us know in 5 business days if we are approved. We were both excited and couldn't wait to find out how much credit we were going to get. In about a week, the letter arrived and I called Frank at work and told him that he can open the letter when he arrives from work. When he got home, I gave him the letter to open. The letter started by saying, "Congratulations, you have been approved for a credit line of $5,000. We were very happy. I asked Frank, why did we get so much? He said because we applied jointly instead of individually, and we have been paying our bills on time and don't owe too much money. I asked Frank, what are we going to buy with the extra money? Frank said that we should purchase things that we need and make sure that we pay the monthly payments on time. We paid off what we bought every month. By doing this, we didn't have to pay interest. One day I asked Frank, do you think we could get another TV for the bedroom? And he agreed. That way, we will spend more time in bed. We got a 27-inch color TV. Then we just paid the minimum payment every month. Our credit rating was improving. After about a year, we started getting credit card offers in the mail. Frank asked me, do you want to apply? And I said that we should apply individually. We each got our own credit cards. This way Frank could buy what he wanted and I could buy what I wanted. We kept paying the minimum payments on all the credit cards. We both like having these credit cards. This way we could eat out, go shopping, and not have to pay cash. And we were building our credit rating. Everything was going along fine. I didn't have any worries, but Frank took care of all the bills. Frank told me that we were breaking even and still had available credit. What Frank didn't tell me was that he was paying one credit card with another credit card. He was getting more and more credit cards. He even opened the mailbox to receive a lot of credit cards. This way I only got the mail for our credit cards, and Frank got all the bills for all the credit cards he was getting. This went on for a while. I didn't have a clue. We seemed to have everything we wanted, and all the bills were being paid on time. I asked Frank, "How are we doing?" He said, "Great." I didn't notice that as fast as our paychecks were going in the bank, the money was going out just as fast. Frank told me that even though we don't have much savings, but we have plenty of available credit. I didn't realize that after about 7 years had passed since we first got the loan, and during this time we both kept working. I asked Frank, what will happen if we can't work or lose our jobs, and we can't pay our bills? He said, "Don't worry, we have insurance to cover us in case of an emergency." I only worked part-time and Frank worked full-time. Frank worked at the video store in our neighborhood for about 10 years and loved his job, but didn't get paid that much. But he was the manager, and the owner really trusted him, and we never had to pay for movie rentals. At this point of the story, I didn't know that Frank was using false information to get more and more credit cards, to pay off other credit cards. The credit cards in our name was coming to our home address, and the credit cards that Frank got were going to a post office box that he paid for, and he used the box number by changing it to an apartment number, and used the street address of the post office. However, Frank had files that I didn't know about in the names that he used to get the bogus credit cards. What happens next is very shocking. Chapter 2, The Break-In. The following account of the break-in by the United States Postal Service is accurate because I was present during this ordeal. The Postal Service knocked in our front door and living room door with battering rams with guns drawn. Upon intrusion into our home, the armed postal agents proceeded through the living room to the master bedroom, located on the rear of the first floor where I was sleeping. One of the unknown postal agents woke me up by placing the tip of his loaded gun to my head. I woke up screaming at the sight of armed postal agents surrounding the bed. The Jane Doe postal agent calmed me down and told me that they had a search warrant to search the premises. At about this time, Frank arrived on the scene. Frank was outside moving his car to another parking spot when he heard the commotion. The postal inspector in charge of the operation asked Frank some kind of routine questions. Frank was more worried about my well-being than the busted-in doors. I was still visibly shaken at what just happened. Then the postal inspector ordered Frank to empty his pockets and told him that he wasn't going to be arrested, and some personal items were confiscated, which the Jane Doe postal agent logged in on the inventory sheets. Even though Frank didn't interfere with the search of the premises, the postal inspector still handcuffed Frank's hands behind him. I was enraged when I saw this, and I told the postal agents, Frank didn't do anything wrong, then why are you treating him like a criminal? And I also yelled out loud, he is innocent until proven guilty. Then one of the unknown postal agents told me that if I didn't shut up, they were going to handcuff me too. Again, the Jane Doe postal agent intervened and calmed me down by telling me that they won't be there too long, and when they're done searching, Frank will be unhandcuffed. At about this time, the police showed up. One of the officers stood guard at the front door while the search continued. Frank sat quietly on the living room sofa, with his hands cuffed behind him and not in front of him. Frank only spoke if one of the unknown postal agents asked him a question about the items that they were seizing. At about 85 minutes into the search, the postal inspector seemed frustrated because he couldn't find the items that were listed on the affidavit of the search warrant. The searchers kept asking Frank, where is the computer hidden? Frank told them he didn't have a computer. This is about the time that they started taking items that were in plain view, that were not on the affidavit of the search warrant. The postal inspector and the other unknown postal agents continued to explore the premises for over 3 hours. The searchers even went back into our master bedroom, which we consider our zone of privacy, and rummaged and ransacked every inch of the room, leaving a big mess. Even though the postal agents searched the premises with a fine-tooth comb, all the items that were seized were taken from the living room, where Frank sat handcuffed. Besides the 22 items seized, the searchers confiscated Frank's personal papers, files, and effects. The affidavit of the search warrant stated that anything in Frank's last name on it was not to be seized. Instead, the searchers took 8 years of personal files, which included credit card bills and other bills, which Frank was currently paying. It took a postal delivery truck to hold all the items and personal property that they seized from our home. The search of the premises started at around 8 a.m. and concluded at 12:30 p.m. At this time, Frank was unhandcuffed and was taken to the postal headquarters to be booked. After the booking process was complete, Frank spent about 6 hours doing handwriting exemplars, and the postal inspector drove Frank home and told him that he would pick him up in a few days to finish the handwriting exemplars. The postal inspector picked Frank up to finish the handwriting exemplars, which took about 3 hours to complete. During this ordeal, the postal inspector and the other unknown postal agents treated Frank with indifference. This was uncalled for, since Frank cooperated with them 100%. The following is my interpretation of what happened. The searchers used excessive force to execute the search of our premises. By knocking in both doors with guns drawn to show authority, this could have been avoided because they saw Frank leave to move his car. Frank's freedom was taken away from him because he was handcuffed on the sofa for over 4 hours and wasn't free to move about. This incident will be burned in our memory forever because of the harsh treatment that we received at the hands of the postal inspector and the other unknown postal agents on that September day in 1996. After a lengthy investigation, Frank was sentenced on October 28, 1997 to 12 to 14 months. Frank threw himself on the mercy of the court. The probation department recognized Frank's unusual circumstances and recommended a downward departure, which was denied. Finally, Frank and I feel that our Fourth Amendment rights were violated. If a reasonable person wouldn't have wanted to be treated the way Frank and I were treated by the postal inspector and the unknown postal agents, then what happened to us must be unreasonable. Chapter 3. The Public Defender. Frank first met his public defender in mid-September of 1996. She told him that the government was going to make a big case against him. He told her his side of the story. She responded by saying, "You act like you didn't do anything wrong. Remember, you broke the law, and there's a law for everything. Even though what you did wasn't a violent crime, you still could do time based on how much they say you owe." Frank asked her, "How is my sentence going to be determined?" She told him that they use the sentencing guidelines. For example, if you owe over $200,000, you could serve 12 to 18 months in prison. She asked Frank, "How much do you think you owe?" Frank said, "Around $50,000. She told him, "It's not what you say you owe, it's what the government says you owe, no matter what." Frank then told her that they have to prove it. His public defender then told him that they are going to use the evidence that they confiscated from your home. She then said to Frank that she will be working closely with the federal authorities on his case. Frank heard enough, so he left her office and went home. During the next few months, he didn't hear anything from his public defender. She finally called him in mid-January of 1997 to meet with her and the postal inspector at the postal headquarters to go over the fraud loss statement. At this meeting, the postal inspector told Frank that he owed $233,000. Frank told him that this total has to be wrong. The postal inspector told Frank that this total is only wrong if you didn't use false information to get the credit, and that erroneous items can be removed if you can prove it. Then the public defender chimed in and told Frank that errors are going to be hard to prove, and that she was going to go over the fraud loss totals and would let him know if she found any discrepancies, and also told him that she made an appointment with a psychiatrist for him to get an evaluation. Frank went to see this shrink in mid-February of 1997. After a 2.5-hour talk with this doctor, he told Frank that he wanted to see him again to take a true and false test. And a couple months had passed, and Frank's public defender called him to meet in her office to go over the paperwork. At this meeting, Frank asked her about the doctor's evaluation, and she said that she didn't get that yet and changed the subject. She then asked Frank, "How do you want to plead?" Frank said, "Not guilty." She told Frank, "If you do that, you will piss off the Assistant United States District Attorney, and he will throw the book at you." Frank asked her, "What do you mean by that?" She said that he will card in all the evidence, bring in witnesses, and even bring in the custodian from one of the banks involved in your case to testify against you. So Frank decided to sign the guilty plea and left and went home. After a month later, the public defender called Frank and told him to bring his financial statements to her for the probation department. Frank went to her office and gave her the requested information, and he asked her how was his case going. She told him not too good. Frank asked her why. She said that we have to get the amount you owe lower. Frank told her that there were items on the list twice. She looked at her copy of the list and made corrections and told Frank that this was only going to get the amount from $233,000 down to $211,000. Then he asked her, does the statute of limitations apply to my case? And she said no. Frank then told her that he felt like he was being railroaded by the government to cover up their botched search and seizure of his home. She told him, if you feel that way, you can always go back and contest the facts. And remember, the government didn't make up the totals. They got the information from the files that they confiscated from your home. Frank left her office and went home. He didn't hear anything for about 3 months. And then he received an arraignment notice to appear in mid-July of 1997. He took a drug test and went to the court to be arraigned. The following individuals were present in the courtroom, including the judge, the U.S. Assistant District Attorney, the Postal Inspector, the probation officer, and his public defender. Frank stood before the judge and told the judge that he understood everything. He was released on $10,000 bail and instructed to report to the probation department every Thursday by phone between 9 a.m. and 12 noon. Frank's sentencing date was set for mid-October of 1997. His public defender called Frank and told him that she was going to use the doctor's report as a defense in his case, and then he has gotten over the compulsive behavior that he was diagnosed with. Next, Frank received a notice changing his court date from mid-October of 1997 to the end of October of 1997. After all of these months, Frank was finally going to have his day in court. The following remarks is the way Frank felt about the court proceedings. Everything that Frank said was ignored because he wasn't a prominent person. He was a big nobody, and they could say and do anything to him they wanted to, and he couldn't do anything about it. The probation department recommended a downward departure in Frank's case because he was working, paying his restitution, and paying his household bills on time, and also because that I depended on him. The doctor in his report to the court stated that he was impressed at Frank's outlook on life and the way he channeled his compulsive behavior to improve his situation. The court didn't look at his experience, character, hardship, and responsibilities. They looked at a non-violent crime as if it was a violent crime, because the U.S. Assistant District Attorney hired 2 witnesses to testify that Frank did harm to them by ruining their credit. The United States Assistant District Attorney also said that home confinement was not enough punishment for Frank because he's already serving that, because all he does is stay home with me, looking at videos, and we don't go anywhere. The following comments made by the judge before sentencing really upset Frank, but he kept his mouth shut. The judge asked him, "What do you have to say about yourself?" He stepped forward and told the judge that he never intended to harm anyone by his actions, and he used the credit for the things that we needed. He also told the judge that he was paying the bills that he incurred in a timely fashion. The judge looked at Frank with disdain and said, "Is that all you have to say?" The judge retired to her chambers and returned in a few minutes with her verdict. Before she read the verdict, she read Frank the Riot Act. She said that he used other people's money to live on, and you did harm two innocent people that you didn't even know. The judge mentioned me by saying that I could get someone else to take Frank's place, and if I needed help to move, the court would find me a place. The next remark really ticked me off when she said that I was just as bad as Frank because I shared with him all the things that he bought with other people's money. I am glad that I wasn't in the court because I would have given this hanging judge a piece of my mind. Finally, the judge sentenced Frank to 12 to 14 months based on the sentencing guidelines. When Frank left the courtroom, he asked the public defender, why did the United States Assistant District Attorney bring in witnesses? The public defender told Frank that he knew he could get away with it, and that Frank pissed off the judge, and that's why she didn't show any mercy. So when Frank got home, he told me what had happened, and that's what I wrote here. Frank decided to get his own lawyer to make sure that he gets the fair treatment that he deserves.